The Velthari ship descended through Earth's atmosphere like a silver needle-piercing blue fabric. It was the year 2187, and humanity had known about alien life for exactly 14 months. In that time, they had learned two important lessons. First, the galaxy was full of species who had been traveling between stars for thousands of years. Second, none of them respected humans. Ambassador Kethral of the Velthari Trade Consortium watched the clouds part beneath his vessel. His scales shifted from deep purple to satisfied gold. This was going to be easy. The humans were desperate, isolated, and completely ignorant of galactic commerce. They were perfect victims. The landing site was a former military base in Switzerland. Kethral had insisted on neutral ground, knowing it would make the humans feel important. In truth, it made no difference. The outcome was already decided. Director Sarah Mitchell waited at the edge of the landing pad. She was the head of Earth's newly formed Space Council, a position that sounded impressive, but mostly involved begging for scraps from alien traders. Behind her stood a dozen advisors, scientists, and military officers. They all wore their best clothes. They all looked nervous. The Velthari ship's ramp lowered with a soft hiss. Kethral emerged flanked by two assistants carrying holographic displays. He was tall and thin, with scales that covered his entire body and eyes that held no warmth. "Director Mitchell," he said, his translator turning alien sounds into perfect English. "I bring greetings from the Galactic Trade Consortium, and I bring an opportunity." Sarah kept her expression neutral. In the 14 months since first contact, every alien visitor had brought an opportunity. So far, those opportunities had cost Earth dearly. Advanced medicines that turned out to be expired. Communication devices that only worked one way. A navigation system that led 3 ships into a sun. "We're listening," she said. Kethral gestured and his assistants activated their displays. A hologram appeared in the air between them, showing a massive warship. It was beautiful in a brutal way, all sharp angles and hidden weapons. "The Sovereign's Blade," Kethral announced, "a consortium battle cruiser, decommissioned after 300 years of service. One of the finest vessels ever built by Velthari engineers." Sarah studied the image. She knew nothing about alien ships, but she knew what power looked like. This ship had power. "Why would you sell us a warship?" she asked. Kethral's scales flickered with amusement. "Because you need one, Director. Earth sits on the edge of contested space. The Kreth Dominion has been expanding for decades. The Void Hunters raid shipping lanes regularly. Without protection, your world is vulnerable." This was true. Earth had received warnings from other species about the dangers lurking in nearby space. Some warnings seemed genuine. Others felt like sales pitches for overpriced defense systems. "And what do you want in return?" Kethral named his price. "Earth's entire production of rare earth minerals for the next 10 years. Neodymium, dysprosium, terbium, elements that powered everything from smartphones to spacecraft." Sarah felt her stomach drop. That was an enormous price. It would cripple Earth's own technology development for a decade. "The ship is 300 years old," she said carefully. "Surely it needs repairs." "Minor work," Kethral assured her. "The reactor needs recalibration. Some weapon systems require updating. The hull has cosmetic damage. Nothing your engineers cannot handle with proper guidance. We will include full technical manuals." Sarah looked at her advisors. General Hammond, the military representative, was practically vibrating with excitement. Dr. Chen, the chief scientist, was more cautious, but even she seemed intrigued. "We need to inspect the vessel," Sarah said. Kethral had anticipated this. "Of course, I will transport your team to the ship's current location immediately." 3 days later, a human inspection team stood in the engineering bay of the Sovereign's Blade. The ship floated in orbit around Neptune, hidden from casual observation. It was even more impressive in person than in the hologram. Chief Engineer Maya Chen walked through the corridors with growing wonder. She had spent her career building spacecraft. Compared to this vessel, her greatest achievements were paper airplanes. "The power output alone," she murmured, studying a display panel. "This reactor could light up half of North America." The Velthari guide smiled. His name was Threx, and he had been assigned to make sure the humans saw exactly what they were supposed to see. Nothing more. Velthari engineering is unmatched, he said proudly. This ship survived 12 major battles. It destroyed a Kreth destroyer fleet at the Battle of Crimson Nebula. Maya nodded absently. She was more interested in the ship itself than its history. As they moved through the vessel, she made notes on her tablet. The reactor room, the weapons deck, the bridge with its panoramic windows. Everything seemed functional. Old, certainly. There were scratches on the walls and dents in the floors, but the bones were good. The structure was sound. What Maya did not see were the hidden problems. The hairline fractures in the reactor core, carefully concealed beneath fresh plating. The weapon systems that had been welded shut after catastrophic malfunctions. The navigation computer that had suffered a complete neural collapse and now processed commands in a language no living being spoke. Threx kept the inspection moving quickly. He pointed out the impressive features and glossed over the trouble spots. When Maya asked to see the secondary power junction, he claimed it was sealed for safety reasons. When she requested the maintenance logs, he provided a heavily edited version. The inspection lasted 2 days. At the end, Maya submitted her report to Director Mitchell. The ship is old but salvageable. With investment, we could have it operational within 18 months. She was wrong, but she had no way of knowing that. The Velthari had spent considerable effort making sure of it. The deal was signed 1 week later. Earth transferred the first shipment of rare earth minerals. The Velthari transferred ownership of the Sovereign's blade. Both sides walked away believing they had won. The Sovereign's blade arrived in Earth orbit on a Tuesday morning. Millions of people watched it descend through the clouds, escorted by a swarm of human spacecraft that looked like insects beside a whale. It was the largest artificial object in Earth's sky, a symbol of humanity's entry into the galactic community. The celebration lasted until the engineering teams went aboard. Maya Chen stood in the reactor room, staring at readouts that made no sense. The reactor was not merely in need of recalibration, the reactor was dying. Cracks ran through the containment vessel like spiderwebs. Radiation leaked from seams that should have been solid. The entire system was perhaps 6 months away from catastrophic failure. "This is impossible," she whispered. "We inspected this." Her assistant, a young engineer named Jackson, pulled up the original scans. They must have placed shielding over the damage. Temporary patches, everything looked fine on the surface. Maya moved to the weapons deck. The story was the same. The main cannon, supposedly capable of cracking moons, had been fused solid. Someone had welded the firing mechanisms together, probably after an explosion that would have killed the crew. The missile tubes were empty and corroded. The point defense systems responded to commands and error codes. The navigation computer was the worst surprise. When Maya activated it, the screen filled with symbols that no one recognized. Not Velthari script, not any known galactic language. The computer had been programmed in a tongue that had died centuries ago, and no one had thought to update it. "How bad is it?" Director Mitchell asked that evening. Maya sat in the Space Council chamber, surrounded by officials who looked increasingly sick. "Bad. The ship is functional in the same way a car with no engine is functional. You can sit in it, you can pretend to drive, but it's not going anywhere." General Hammond slammed his fist on the table. "Those alien bastards cheated us." "Yes," Maya agreed. "They sold us the most expensive paperweight in human history." Director Mitchell closed her eyes. Earth had surrendered a decade of rare earth production. They had nothing to show for it except a broken ship and shattered pride. The other galactic species would hear about this. They would laugh. The humans had been scammed like children. "Can you fix it?" Mitchell asked quietly. Maya considered the question. The logical answer was no. The ship needed a complete overhaul. New reactor, new weapons, new navigation systems. It would take years and resources that Earth did not have. But Maya had spent her life fixing things. She had grown up on a farm where nothing was ever thrown away, where broken machines were rebuilt from spare parts and stubbornness. She had built her first engine at 15 from scrap metal and determination. "They think they sold us junk," Maya said slowly. "They have no idea what junk means to humans." She stood up, gathering her notes. Her mind was already working, seeing not the problems, but the possibilities. "Get me every engineer on the planet who wants to prove something," she said. "Get me the angry ones." The stubborn ones. The ones who don't know how to quit. General Hammond leaned forward. What are you going to do? Maya smiled. It was not a nice smile. I'm going to fix their garbage, and then I'm going to fly it back to them and explain what happens when you try to cheat humanity. She walked out of the chamber, already making calls. Behind her, the officials exchanged uncertain glances. They had just watched something change in their chief engineer. Something that felt dangerous. 3 years later, they would understand. The galaxy would understand. But for now, the work began. The orbital station did not have an official name. The engineers who worked there called it the garage. It hung in the darkness between Earth and Moon, a sprawling collection of modules and docking bays that had been assembled in secret over 18 months. The Sovereign's blade sat at its center like a patient on an operating table. Maya Chen floated through the station's main corridor, her magnetic boots clicking against the metal floor. 3 years had passed since the Velthari scam. 3 years of 18-hour days, impossible problems, and small victories. She had aged a decade in that time, but she had never felt more alive. Chief, Jackson called from a side passage. We've got the new reactor core online. Power output is stable at 300% of original specifications. Maya smiled. The reactor had been their first and greatest challenge. The original Velthari design was elegant but flawed, dependent on rare fuel sources that Earth could not obtain. Human engineers had studied it for months before proposing something radical. Why are we trying to fix their system? A young physicist named Dr. Obi had asked during a late-night brainstorming session. Why not build our own? That question had changed everything. Earth had been developing fusion technology for decades. They had experimented with antimatter in small quantities. What if they combined both approaches? What if they ignored the elegant Velthari design and built something crude but powerful? The hybrid reactor was born from that conversation. It was ugly by galactic standards, a brute force solution to a complex problem. But it worked. The new core produced 3 times the power of the original, using fuel that Earth could manufacture domestically. Maya entered the main engineering bay and looked up at the ship. It no longer resembled the vessel the Velthari had sold them. The hull gleamed with new plating, reinforced with carbon nanotube latticing that was stronger than the original design. Where there had been cracks and patches, there was now seamless metal. Weapon status? She asked. Jackson pulled up a holographic display. All primary systems operational. The kinetic accelerators are ready for testing. This had been their second revolution. The Velthari weapons use concentrated energy beams, standard technology across the galaxy. Every spacefaring species had developed shields to deflect such attacks. The result was wars of attrition, where ships circled each other for hours, waiting for shields to fail. Human military history offered a different approach. Humans had spent thousands of years throwing rocks at each other. They had developed this simple concept into an art form, from slings to catapults to cannons to railguns. The kinetic accelerators on the rebuilt ship fired solid projectiles at a significant fraction of light speed. No energy signature to detect, no beam to deflect, just mass and velocity, the oldest weapons in the universe, delivered with terrifying precision. General Hammond had watched the first test firing with tears in his eyes. A target drone had vanished in a flash of superheated metal. Beautiful, he had whispered. Absolutely beautiful. The galaxy had forgotten about kinetic weapons. They were primitive, dirty, and inelegant. Exactly the kind of thing they expected from humans. They would not expect humans to make them effective. Maya took a lift to the navigation deck, where a team of linguists and programmers worked in controlled chaos. This had been their strangest challenge. The navigation computer spoke a dead language, and no translation existed. Dr. Sarah Okonkwo, the team's lead linguist, had approached the problem like an archaeologist decoding ancient texts. She had spent 18 months analyzing the alien symbols, looking for patterns and meanings. The breakthrough came when she realized the language was not truly dead. It had simply evolved. The Velthari don't know their own history, she had explained to Maya. This language was their ancestors' tongue, from before they joined the consortium. It changed over centuries, but the roots remained the same. Working backward from modern Velthari, her team had reconstructed the ancient language. And in doing so, They had discovered something unexpected. "Chief," Dr. Okonkwo said as Maya entered, "we've finished translating the star charts." She activated a display showing a three-dimensional map of nearby space. Red dots marked various locations throughout Velthari territory. "These are military installations," Okonkwo said. "Hidden bases, supply depots, sensor stations." The Velthari thought this data was unreadable. They never bothered to delete it. Maya studied the map with growing amazement. The Velthari had given them a complete picture of their defensive network. Every strength and weakness, every blind spot and vulnerability. "They didn't just sell us a broken ship," Maya said quietly. "They sold us their secrets." Word of the Human Reconstruction Project had leaked to the wider galaxy, despite all efforts at secrecy. The consortium received reports of unusual activity in Earth orbit, ships coming and going, energy signatures that did not match any known technology. Ambassador Kethral dismissed the reports with a wave of his scaled hand. "They're probably trying to salvage parts," he told his colleagues. "The fools actually think they can fix it." The consortium laughed. The idea of primitive humans rebuilding a Velthari warship was absurd. They lacked the knowledge, the materials, and the understanding. It would be like cave dwellers trying to repair a quantum computer. This attitude of contempt was common across the galaxy. Humans were newcomers, barely out of their gravity well, with no understanding of how things worked. They were customers at best, victims at worst. None of them considered an alternative. None of them imagined that humans might not try to fix the ship the Velthari way. None of them suspected that humans might build something entirely different. On the garage, Maya called a meeting of her senior engineers. "Final systems check," she announced. "Go through everything. I want this ship ready for its first flight test." The reports came in one by one. Reactor operational, weapons operational, shields operational with modifications, navigation operational with full translation, life support operational with improvements, hull integrity exceeding original specifications. "What about the ship's name?" Jackson asked. "We can't keep calling it the Sovereign's Blade. That's a Velthari name for a Velthari ship. This isn't a Velthari ship anymore." Maya nodded. She had been thinking about this for months. The Velthari had sold them a sword, broken and useless. But humans had reforged that sword into something new. "We'll call it the Reclamation," she said, "because that's what we've done. We've reclaimed their garbage and made it ours." The name spread through the station within hours. Engineers began painting it on the hull in bold letters. UES Reclamation, United Earthship Reclamation, a reminder of what had been taken and what had been rebuilt. Admiral James Okonkwo arrived at the station 1 week later. He was a veteran of Earth's small space fleet, a practical man with no patience for politics or ceremony. He had been chosen to command the reclamation because he could make hard decisions quickly. "Show me what you've built," he said to Maya. She gave him the full tour: the engine room with its hybrid reactor, the weapons deck with its kinetic accelerators, the bridge with its newly translated navigation systems, every corridor and compartment that had been rebuilt from scratch. Admiral Okonkwo listened without interrupting. He examined the technical specifications. He asked pointed questions about capabilities and limitations. At the end, he stood on the bridge and looked out at the stars. "How fast can we reach Velthari space?" he asked. Maya checked her calculations. 14 days with the new drive system. "And can we win a fight when we get there? Against one ship? Easily. Against their entire defense fleet?" Maya paused. "We haven't tested that scenario." Admiral Okonkwo smiled. It was a cold expression. "Then I suppose we'd better find out." The test flight began at midnight, Earth time. The reclamation disengaged from the garage and drifted into open space. Its running lights glowed blue against the darkness. Its hull shimmered with the faint energy of charged shields. On the bridge, Admiral Okonkwo sat in the command chair. Around him, a crew of 200 men and women prepared for the unknown. They were all volunteers. They all understood the risks. "Navigation," the Admiral said. "Plot a course for the outer solar system. Let's see what the ship can do." The reclamation accelerated smoothly, pushing toward Neptune and beyond. The hybrid drive purred with power. The inertial dampeners kept the crew comfortable at speeds that should have killed them. Earth's monitoring stations tracked the ship's progress with growing amazement. The reclamation was fast, faster than any human vessel ever built, faster than the Velthari specifications had promised. "We're receiving optimal performance across all systems," Jackson reported. "Power output is stable, weapons are hot, navigation is perfect." Maya stood at the engineering station, watching data flow across her screens. 3 years of work, 3 years of struggle and frustration and triumph. All of it led to this moment. "Weapons test," Admiral Okonkwo ordered. "Target the asteroid at coordinates 773. The kinetic accelerators fired. A series of metal slugs streaked through space at incredible velocity. 3 seconds later, an asteroid the size of a small mountain vanished in a flash of fragmented stone. "Direct hit," the weapons officer reported. "Target destroyed." Admiral Okonkwo nodded with satisfaction. He looked at Maya and spoke quietly. "Send a message to Director Mitchell. Tell her the reclamation is ready." Maya felt her heart racing. Ready, such a simple word for such a complex meaning. Ready to fly, ready to fight, ready to show the galaxy what humanity could do. She thought about the Velthari who had cheated them. She thought about Ambassador Kethral and his smug smile. She thought about all the species who had laughed at the stupid humans with their broken ship. They would not be laughing much longer. The reclamation turned toward home, its mission complete. Behind it, the destroyed asteroid drifted as dust and debris, a warning written in the language of physics and spite. Humanity was coming, and they had learned how to fight. The reclamation dropped out of hyperspace above Velthari Prime like a ghost appearing from fog. One moment the sky was empty. The next, a warship hung in orbit, its hull gleaming under the light of the alien sun. Admiral Okonkwo watched the planet below through the bridge's panoramic windows. Velthari Prime was a beautiful world, all purple forests and silver oceans. 8 billion Velthari lived on its surface, going about their daily lives completely unaware of what was about to happen. "Sir," the communications officer said, "we're being hailed by planetary defense. They're demanding identification." "Let them wait," Okonkwo replied. "Navigation, confirm our position. I want to be sure we're exactly where they can see us." The reclamation had traveled for 12 days to reach this point. 12 days of careful planning and quiet anticipation. The crew had trained for every scenario, prepared for every contingency. Now the moment had arrived. On Velthari Prime's surface, Ambassador Kethral was enjoying his morning meal when his assistant burst into the dining room. The young Velthari's scales had gone pale with fear. "Ambassador, there's a ship in orbit, a warship. It's the one we sold to the humans." Kethral nearly choked on his food. "That's impossible. That ship was destroyed years ago. The reactor should have failed within months. I've confirmed the identification signature. It's the same vessel, but the energy readings are..." The assistant trailed off, unable to find words. "Are what? They're 3 times higher than our original specifications?" Kethral stood so quickly that his chair fell backward. He rushed to his communication terminal and connected to the Planetary Defense Network. What he saw made his scales turn the color of ash. The ship in orbit was indeed the Sovereign's blade, but it had been transformed. The hull was different, reinforced with materials that glowed faintly in the sensor scans. The weapons arrays had been completely redesigned, and the power output was impossible. "How did they do this?" Kethral whispered. On the reclamation, Admiral Okonkwo finally opened communications. His face appeared on screens across Velthari Prime, broadcast to every major government facility. "Greetings to the people of Velthari Prime. I am Admiral James Okonkwo of the United Earthship Reclamation. 3 years ago, your government sold us this vessel. You told us it was functional. You lied." The Admiral paused, letting his words sink in. "We have come to discuss that lie. Please respond within 1 hour, or we will begin discussions of a different nature." The transmission ended. Panic spread across the planet like wildfire. Defense Commander Vrathul scrambled his fleet within 30 minutes. 12 Velthari warships rose from orbital stations and military bases, forming a defensive line between the human vessel and the planet. They were modern ships, equipped with the latest weapons and shields. Each one was crewed by experienced soldiers. Commander Vrathul had fought in 7 campaigns across consortium space. He had destroyed pirates, crushed rebellions, and enforced trade agreements at gunpoint. He was not afraid of one rebuilt antique. "Target the human vessel," he ordered. "Full power to weapons. We'll burn them out of the sky and recover the wreckage." The Velthari fleet opened fire. 12 ships launched concentrated energy beams at the reclamation, enough firepower to destroy a small moon. The reclamation's shields absorbed the attack without visible strain. "Interesting," Admiral Okonkwo commented. "Their weapons are exactly as powerful as our intelligence suggested. Helm, evasive pattern delta. Weapons, you may respond." The reclamation moved with sudden speed, spinning away from the fleet while its kinetic accelerators charged. The Velthari watched in confusion. Why was the human ship running? Then the first salvo hit. Commander Vrathul barely had time to register the alarm before his flagship's shields collapsed. The kinetic rounds punched through energy barriers designed to stop laser fire. Metal slugs traveling at a fraction of light speed did not care about elegant defense systems. The flagship's bridge exploded in a storm of shattered metal in escaping atmosphere. Vrathul died before he could give another order. Across the fleet, chaos erupted. The human weapons were incomprehensible. No energy signature, no warning, just silent death streaking through space at impossible speed. The battle lasted 4 minutes. 4 minutes of terror and destruction that would be studied in military academies for centuries. The reclamation moved through the Velthari fleet like a predator among prey, destroying ships with cold efficiency. When it was over, 12 warships drifted as burning wreckage. 3,000 Velthari soldiers were dead or dying. The reclamation had not suffered a single casualty. Admiral Okonkwo reopened communications. His expression had not changed. "Your defense fleet has been neutralized. I am still interested in discussing the fraudulent sale of this vessel. Please respond immediately." Ambassador Kethral responded. He had no choice. "This is Ambassador Kethral of the Galactic Trade Consortium. We are prepared to negotiate." "Excellent. I am sending coordinates for a meeting location in orbit. You have 2 hours to arrive. Come alone. If any weapons are detected, the meeting will be canceled. Permanently." Kethral's shuttle docked with the reclamation 90 minutes later. He was escorted through corridors that he barely recognized. Everything had changed. The walls were reinforced with strange materials. The lighting was different. Even the air smelled wrong. He was brought to a conference room where Admiral Okonkwo waited with several human officers. Director Sarah Mitchell appeared on a view screen, representing Earth's government. "Ambassador," the Admiral said, "please sit." Kethral sat. His scales shifted through colors of fear and anger. "3 years ago," Director Mitchell began, "your government sold us this vessel for the price of a decade's worth of rare earth minerals. You claimed it was functional. You knew it was garbage. There may have been some miscommunication about the ship's condition," Kethral started. "There was no miscommunication. Your inspection teams concealed the damage. Your engineers provided falsified documentation. You deliberately sold us a vessel that should have exploded within months." Kethral said nothing. There was nothing to say. "We have reviewed your original files," Admiral Okonkwo said. "We know exactly what you did. We also know this was not the first time. The consortium has been cheating younger species for centuries." He activated a holographic display. Names and dates filled the air. Transaction after transaction, fraud after fraud. Species who had paid fortunes for worthless technology. Civilizations that had collapsed under the weight of consortium debts. The Karathi, the Silken, the deep ones of Cygnus, all cheated, all exploited, all forgotten. Kethral's scales went pale. "How do you know this?" "Your navigation computer. You thought it was unreadable. Our linguists decoded it. Every record, every secret route, every hidden file. We know everything." Director Mitchell leaned forward on her screen. "Here are our terms. Full reparation for the fraudulent sale. Return of all rare earth minerals transferred to the consortium. Compensation equal to double the original value." "That's impossible," Kethral protested. "The Council will never agree." "They will agree," Admiral Okonkwo said quietly, "or we will begin visiting other consortium worlds. We have the star charts, we have the weapons, and we have 3 years of anger to work through." Kethral looked at the humans around him. Their faces were calm, almost pleasant, but their eyes held something cold and patient. There is also the matter of other species, Director Mitchell continued. We will be sharing our information with the Karathi, the Silken, and everyone else the consortium has cheated. They will be seeking their own reparations. You'll destroy us, Kethral whispered. No, the director replied. We'll hold you accountable. What happens after that is up to you. The negotiations lasted 3 days. The consortium council initially refused all demands, then slowly began to surrender as the reclamation took up position above their capital. The ship did not fire. It did not need to. Its presence was threat enough. Word spread across the galaxy with astonishing speed. The humans had rebuilt the broken warship. The humans had defeated the Velthari fleet in 4 minutes. The humans had secrets that made the consortium tremble. On a dozen worlds, species who had been cheated by the consortium began to hope. On 100 more, governments began to reconsider their attitude toward Earth. At the consortium's central station, a Velthari diplomat sat with her colleague in a private chamber. They watched news reports of the human victory with growing dread. They were supposed to be primitive, she said, simple creatures who barely understood space travel. Her colleague shook his head slowly. We made a terrible mistake. We saw their inexperience and assumed weakness. We never considered what else they might be. What are they? He turned to face her, his scales rippling with fear he could not hide. Survivors, fighters, a species that spent its entire history struggling to survive. We sold them a broken sword, and they forged it into something greater than anything we could build. He looked back at the news feed, at the image of the reclamation hanging in orbit above their homeworld. We awakened something dangerous, and now the galaxy will never be the same. The news spread across the galaxy like a shockwave. Within days of the Velthari confrontation, every major species knew what had happened. The primitive humans had rebuilt a broken warship and humiliated one of the consortium's founding members. The impossible had become real. In the council chambers of 100 worlds, officials gathered to discuss what this meant. Some dismissed it as a fluke, a lucky victory that would never be repeated. Others saw something more troubling. The humans had not just won a battle. They had exposed the consortium's darkest secrets. On Earth, Director Mitchell faced a different kind of challenge. The reclamation had returned home victorious, but victory brought complications. Other species were suddenly very interested in human friendship. Messages flooded the Space Council's communication systems. Requests for alliance, offers of trade, desperate pleas for help. The Karathi want to meet with us, her assistant reported. They're one of the species the consortium cheated. They lost their entire merchant fleet in a fraudulent deal 40 years ago. Mitchell nodded. Schedule the meeting and start making a list. Every species mentioned in those files, I want to know who they are and what they lost. The list grew longer every day. The consortium had been operating its scam for centuries, preying on younger species who knew no better. Dozens of civilizations had been cheated, exploited, and discarded. Some had recovered, many had not. Maya Chen watched these developments from the garage where she continued to supervise the reclamation's maintenance. The ship had performed perfectly during the Velthari encounter, but she was not satisfied. Perfection was not enough. She wanted improvement. We're starting construction on 2 more ships, she told her team. Same basic design, but with upgrades based on what we learned. I want them ready within 18 months. That's an aggressive timeline, Jackson pointed out. The galaxy is watching us. Every species out there is deciding whether to fear us or befriend us. I want to give them a reason to choose carefully. Back on Velthari Prime, Ambassador Kethral faced the consequences of his failure. The Consortium Council stripped him of his position and assets. He was not executed only because humans had specifically requested that no one be harmed. This mercy was almost worse than punishment. It made the humans look generous while making the Velthari look brutal. The reparations process began immediately. Earth's rare earth minerals were returned with interest. Human auditors arrived on consortium stations to examine financial records. What they found was even worse than expected. They didn't just cheat us, Director Mitchell reported to the Space Council. They've been running this operation for 500 years, billions of credits stolen. entire economies destroyed, species that went extinct because they couldn't recover from consortium fraud. General Hammond leaned back in his chair. What do we do with this information? We share it. Every species that was cheated deserves to know the truth, and every species that wasn't cheated yet deserves a warning. The documents were released through every available channel. News networks across the galaxy carried the story. Consortium officials tried to suppress the information, but it spread too quickly. Their dirty secrets were exposed for all to see. The Karathi were the first to act. Their delegation arrived on Earth 2 weeks after the documents were released. They were a tall species with silvery skin and enormous dark eyes. Their homeworld had once been a trading hub. Now it was a struggling colony, never recovered from what the consortium had done. We lost everything, their leader, a woman named Sarath, explained to Director Mitchell. Ships, stations, our entire economy. The consortium told us it was our fault. Bad investments, poor management. We believed them. It wasn't your fault, Mitchell replied. They targeted you specifically because you were successful. They saw you as competition. Sarath's eyes glittered with something between grief and hope. Can you help us recover what was taken? We can try, but it's going to take time, and it's going to require cooperation, not just between our species, but among everyone the consortium has cheated. This became Earth's new strategy, not conquest but coalition, not revenge but restoration. The humans began reaching out to every victim species they could identify, offering to share information and coordinate efforts. The consortium tried to stop them. Assassins were sent to Earth. They were caught before they could act. Saboteurs attempted to infiltrate the garage. They were discovered and expelled. Bribes were offered to human officials. They were refused and publicly reported. Admiral Okonkwo became the face of human military power. He gave interviews explaining that Earth had no interest in destroying the consortium. We want justice, he said repeatedly. We want accountability. We want the species they cheated to have a chance at recovery. If they cooperate, we can resolve this peacefully. If they resist, he never finished that sentence. He did not need to. The reclamation remained in orbit above Earth, a constant reminder of what humans could do. Its presence alone kept the consortium from attempting any major military action. They had seen what happened to the Velthari fleet. They had no desire to repeat the experience. 6 months after the confrontation, the Consortium Council agreed to open negotiations. They would consider reparations to affected species. They would allow independent auditors to examine their records. They would submit to oversight from a newly formed interstellar commission. It was not everything Earth wanted, but it was a start. On the garage, Maya Chen oversaw the launch of Earth's second rebuilt warship, the UES Vindication. Like the Reclamation, it had been constructed from salvage and spite. Like the Reclamation, it carried weapons that the galaxy had forgotten how to fear. 2 down, she told Admiral Okonkwo during the commissioning ceremony. I want a fleet of 12 within 5 years. That's ambitious. The galaxy is learning to respect us. I want to make sure that respect never fades. But it was Earth's non-military programs that truly changed the balance of power. Human engineers began traveling to other worlds, offering to help repair damaged technology. Human economists worked with struggling species to rebuild their markets. Human diplomats created new frameworks for fair trade. The Karathi were the first success story. With human help, they recovered 3 stations that the consortium had illegally seized decades ago. Their economy began to stabilize. Their population started to grow again. Word spread. Other species came to Earth seeking similar assistance. The Silken, whose communication networks had been sabotaged. The Deep Ones of Seekness, whose ships had been deliberately infected with failing technology. The Thornwood, whose forest worlds had been strip-mined under fraudulent contracts. Earth helped them all. Not out of pure altruism, but out of strategic wisdom. Every species helped was a potential ally. Every economy rebuilt was a new trading partner. Every wrong corrected was another crack in the consortium's power. The Reclamation became a symbol of this transformation. Ships from dozens of species would visit Earth just to see it. The vessel that had started everything. They called it by many names. The Awakener, the Truthbringer, the Lesson. Chief Engineer Maya Chen often gave tours to visiting delegations. She would walk them through the corridors, explaining what had been damaged and how it had been fixed. She showed them the hybrid reactor, the kinetic accelerators, the translated navigation systems. You didn't just repair the ship, a Karathi engineer observed during one such tour. You made it into something new, something that couldn't have existed without both Velthari technology and human innovation. Maya nodded. That's exactly right. They thought they were selling us garbage. Instead, they gave us a foundation. Everything they built, we learned from. Everything they broke, we improved. Is that why you're helping other species? To learn from them too? Partly, but mostly because it's the right thing to do. The consortium has been hurting people for too long. Someone needed to stop them. The engineer tilted her head, studying Maya with those enormous dark eyes. On my world, we have a saying, when you save a life, you become responsible for it. By helping all these species, you're taking on an enormous responsibility. Maya looked out the observation window at the stars beyond. Earth hung in the distance, blue and beautiful, still fragile despite everything humanity had achieved. Maybe that's true, she said quietly, but isn't that what strength is for? Not just protecting yourself, but protecting others? The Karathi engineer had no answer, but later she would tell her people what the human had said, and they would remember it for generations. Far away in the fading halls of consortium power, Ambassador Ketharal heard these stories and wondered where everything had gone wrong. He had seen humans as easy prey, simple creatures to be cheated and forgotten. Instead, they had become the most disruptive force the galaxy had seen in centuries. They didn't even want conquest, which was the strangest part. They could have demanded tribute. They could have seized territory. They could have declared themselves rulers of a new empire. Instead, they wanted fairness, justice, a galaxy where younger species weren't automatically exploited by older ones. It was the most terrifying thing Kethral could imagine, because it meant they weren't just powerful, they were right. And that kind of righteous power could change everything. It already had. 5 years had passed since the reclamation first appeared above Velthari Prime. In that time, the galaxy had changed more than it had in the previous century. Old powers had fallen, new alliances had formed, and humanity stood at the center of it all, not as conquerors, but as builders. The Galactic Trade Consortium was dead. Its final meeting had taken place 2 years ago, when the remaining member species voted to dissolve the organization. Too many secrets had been exposed. Too many crimes had been revealed. No one wanted to be associated with the consortium's legacy of fraud and exploitation. In its place rose the Interstellar Fair Trade Alliance. Founded by Earth and 17 other species, it operated on principles that the consortium would have found laughable. Transparent pricing, independent audits, binding arbitration, actual consequences for cheating. Director Sarah Mitchell stood at the podium during the Alliance's 5th anniversary celebration, addressing representatives from over 40 member species. The venue was a massive station in neutral space, built jointly by human and Karathi engineers. 5 years ago, humanity was cheated, she said. We were sold a broken ship by people who thought we were too stupid to notice. They were wrong, not because we're smarter than them, but because we refused to give up. She paused, looking out at the assembled delegates. Many of them represented species who had also been cheated. The silken, the deep ones, the thornwood. All of them had found their way to this moment through shared suffering and shared recovery. Today, we celebrate something more important than our own survival. We celebrate the principle that brought us together, the belief that strength should protect, not exploit, that power should build, not destroy, that the galaxy can be better than it was. Admiral James Okonkwo had retired the previous year. He lived quietly now on a small island in the Pacific Ocean, spending his days fishing and reading. Sometimes he would receive visits from former crew members, and they would share memories of the old days. The Reclamation had been decommissioned as a military vessel. It now served as a museum, permanently stationed in Earth orbit. Millions of visitors came each year to walk its corridors and learn its story. Human school children touched the walls where Velthari engineers had concealed damage. Alien delegations studied the hybrid reactor that had made everything possible. Maya Chen led the final tour of each day. She was older now, her hair silver, her movements slower, But her eyes still held that same determined spark that had driven her through 3 years of impossible work. The Velthari thought they knew what the ship was worth, she would tell visitors. They calculated its value in credits and power and strategic advantage. But they missed the most important thing. She would pause here, letting curiosity build. They missed what it would become in human hands. Not just a weapon, not just a symbol, but a seed. Everything the Alliance represents, every treaty signed, every economy rebuilt, every species helped. It all started here, with one broken ship and a group of engineers who didn't know how to quit. The Velthari had not vanished after the consortium's collapse. Their species still numbered in the billions, still possessed advanced technology, still traded across the galaxy. But they were no longer dominant. They were partners now, junior members of the new order they had accidentally helped create. Some Velthari resented this deeply. They dreamed of revenge, of reclaiming their former glory, but most had quietly accepted the change. The old ways had brought shame and exposure. Perhaps the new ways would bring something better. A young Velthari named Thera worked as a guide on the Reclamation Museum. She had been born after the confrontation, had grown up hearing stories about the humiliation of her people. She had applied for the position out of curiosity, wanting to understand what had really happened. "Why did you help us?" she asked Maya one evening after the visitors had left. "After everything my people did, why didn't you destroy us?" Maya considered the question carefully. It was one she had asked herself many times. Because destruction is easy, building is hard, and we wanted to prove that humans could do the hard thing. But we cheated you. We stole from you. We laughed at you. Yes, and it hurt. I won't pretend it didn't. Maya looked out a window at the stars. But here's what I learned in those 3 years of rebuilding this ship. Anger is fuel. You can burn it to destroy, or you can burn it to create. We chose to create. Thera was silent for a long moment. Then she asked, "Do you regret it? Any of it?" "I regret that it was necessary. I wish your people had been honest from the start. I wish we could have been partners instead of victims and predators." Maya smiled slightly. "But I don't regret what we built. I don't regret the alliance or the friendships we've made. And I don't regret that you're here, asking these questions. That tells me something important is happening." "What?" "Change. Real change. The kind that lasts for generations." Elsewhere in the galaxy, a new species was making first contact. They were called the Meridian, and they came from a world near the galactic rim. Their ships were small and fragile, their technology barely capable of reaching the nearest stars. In the old days, the consortium would have seen them as perfect victims. Instead, they were met by an alliance delegation led by a human diplomat and a Karathi trade specialist. They were offered membership in the alliance, with all its protections and obligations. The Meridian ambassador, a being of flowing crystal and light, asked the question that every new species asked. "Why? Why help us? You don't know us. You gain nothing from our friendship." The human diplomat smiled. It was the same answer every ambassador gave. "Because once we were you, new, vulnerable, easy to cheat. We got lucky. Someone tried to scam us, and we were stubborn enough to survive it. Now we make sure others don't have to be that lucky." The Meridian joined the alliance a month later. They brought with them a unique understanding of crystal-based computing that would revolutionize data storage across the galaxy. But that was not why they were welcomed. They were welcomed because the alliance was not about exploitation. It was about potential. On Earth, Director Mitchell had also retired. She lived in Geneva now, not far from the site where Ambassador Kethril had first landed all those years ago. Sometimes she would walk to the old landing pad and remember how nervous she had been, how desperate, how completely outmatched. "We didn't know anything," she told visitors who came to hear her stories. "We thought we were entering a friendly universe. We thought alien civilizations would welcome us. We had no idea how naive we were. But you survived," they would say. "You won. We survived because of spite and stubbornness. We won because we had engineers who treated impossible problems as personal insults. And we built something better because we couldn't stand the alternative." The Reclamation floated silently in Earth orbit, catching sunlight on its reinforced hull. It was old now, outdated by newer ships with better technology. But it would never be destroyed. It would never be forgotten. It was a reminder of what humans had suffered, of what they had overcome, of what they had chosen to become. The galaxy had once asked, what can we take from them? They had seen humans as resources, as victims, as easy prey. Now the galaxy asked a different question. What can we build together? And that question, born from betrayal and rebuilt from wreckage, had changed everything. In the museum's main gallery, a plaque bore the words that Maya Chen had spoken at the Reclamation's commissioning ceremony so many years ago. Visitors from dozens of species would stop to read them, to photograph them, to translate them into their own languages. The words were simple, human words for a human truth that had become galactic wisdom. They sold us junk. We made it into something greater. That's not revenge. That's not justice. That's just what we do. We take what's broken and we fix it. We take what's been thrown away and we make it valuable. And if someone tries to cheat us, we don't just survive. We build something better than they could ever imagine. The stars turned slowly outside the museum's windows. Somewhere in the darkness, ships traveled between worlds in peace. Somewhere new species were discovering that the galaxy was not as cruel as it used to be. And it had all started with one broken warship, sold by cheaters to a species too stubborn to accept defeat. That was humanity's gift to the galaxy. Not technology, not weapons, not conquest. Hope. The audacious, unreasonable, absolutely human belief that tomorrow could be better than today. The galaxy was still learning what that meant, but they had a good teacher. A ship made from spite and rebuilt with love, floating in the darkness, waiting to show them the way.